Okay, so now we're recording. Hi, everyone, and thank you for watching Shorts program number 6. These are shorts that have been paired with features, and my name is Joshua Moore. I'm the Shorts programmer. I wanted to thank everybody at home for supporting IndieFest and for watching all the Shorts programs, and thank you to all of the filmmakers that are able to join me here this afternoon to talk about their work. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. So just to get started, I'd like to ask everybody, what was the genesis of your project? What was the original inspiration for the idea? You know, how did it come together? Why did you want to choose the story that you ended up making as your film? So let's start with Maverick, My Dinner with Werner.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here and to have the film in the festival. Really, the film was sparked by our love and fascination with Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski and their borderline murderous relationship. So for like people that might not be fully aware of them, they worked together for over 15 years. They made 5 films together. Throughout all that time, they had a really turbulent working relationship. They both like plotted to kill each other and everything. And so in 1987, they stopped working together forever. Now, there's a lot of little reasons as to why, some of which I kind of hinted at, but there wasn't a singular event. So we thought, okay, this would be fun to sort of tell the story of what really happened, why they really stopped working together, and set it all in a 5-star restaurant where it all goes down while Werner's on a blind date. So that's where it came from. So yeah.
All right, thank you. Jeremy, what inspired Arc of the Apocalypse?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. So it was a little over a year ago that I was going to do a piece for Emergence magazine, and they had an upcoming issue, and the subject was apocalypse. And so I had a few ideas that I pitched to them, and we decided to go with this arc story, and that came from a friend of mine who's a writer, Fred Bonson, who sent me an article. I didn't know it existed. It's about 6 hours north of me. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina, and it's in Kentucky, and I was blown away that not only did it exist, but in the Christmas season, it's all lit up with Christmas lights, and there's an ice skating rink, and so this like weird merger of theme park and conservative Christian biblical representation of Noah's Ark fascinated me. So anyway, I filmed it a year ago, right around Christmas, and then we decided that it wasn't a good fit for Emergence magazine. So I kind of just parked it, and then I started tinkering around with it in August and made the film. And so yeah, the apocalyptic theme comes from obviously God destroying the entire planet except for Noah and his family is fairly apocalyptic, and then of course the belief that there's a coming apocalypse of fire. So
all right, thank you. Certainly a fascinating story for those of you who haven't seen it on this call. Sherry, what inspired Will You Take This Dog?
What inspired? Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. The stimulus check inspired it because we got it. And I had a little bit of money to play around with, which is rare. And I just really wanted to make something. With the pandemic happening and living in New York City, it was, it hit all of us pretty hard, clearly. But I just was dying to get creative again and work with friends and keep it small. And I knew that the dog would show up because he's gotta. And I really wanted to make a little love letter to the East Village in New York City. I've lived there pretty much my entire life. Moved to New York when I was 17, And besides for a couple stints in LA, I've lived in that neighborhood, in that zip code, for most of my life. And I've seen it change and morph, and, you know, some for the good and some not so much for the good. So I just kind of wanted to document it in that moment in time. It was such an interesting transition between, you know, the gentrification that's kind of taken over, and you know, what the pandemic has done to the people who live there, and the homeless and all of that kind of stuff. And we like wanted to capture that moment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Terrence and Jen, Resurrection of the Last Black Man. What inspired this story? Oh, I think you're still on mute.
I was going to say, Terrence, go first.
Jen knows how I am with these Zooms, but anyways, hello, Josh. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. The resurrection of the death of the killing and the murder of David Gregory was a plethora of police brutalities throughout the years. But I was going as far as Rodney King, and the one that really hit me was George Floyd. When he was killed in May 25th of last year, and it triggered me to not just go. I'm a theater director, and so all the theaters had closed. So I needed something to get my frustration out, to get my anger out, and to also showcase other happenings, untold stories, particularly focusing on David Gregory. So that's George Floyd's situation was what triggered me to put Resurrection together.
Jen, anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, just that Terrence, originally his idea was for a video project, but I'm a photographer and I don't do video often. So my idea was that we use the French film La Jetée as an example, where it's just a series of still images for a 20-minute film. So that was the original approach we took. So the film is really a slideshow. There's like 2 seconds of video maybe. And you know, the La Jetée thing was a great idea. It also took 6 weeks of editing because I'm not very good at editing. But also we changed constantly. We kept, as we were editing and working on it, Terrence would change dialogue, and then we would find more images. Then we set every image to play exactly where we wanted it in the music. So it was way more complicated than I thought, but it was also it was an amazing project, and the actors were great. The Michael May, who does the dialogue over it, like, it just blows me away. And the dialogue itself. So it was challenging, but I hope people watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Zach, Birth of a Poet, what inspired your film?
Yeah, hi Josh, hi everybody. Pleasure to be part of this. So first of all, I'm only one of 3 directors on Birth of a Poet. The other 2 are Pedro Gomez Milan and James Franco. And this started as a project at NYU, where James was teaching a class, and he came to us with a book of poetry and said, we're going to adapt poems. So we kind of all read the poetry and picked a few. And then the idea was to make a feature, which we did make. And it was too many, in my opinion, too many egos, too many individual visions. And the feature didn't really hold together. And it was later, after I ran into Chloe Sevigny in Mexico and was talking to her about the film, that it occurred to me to recut a short film from it. And me and Pedro had worked closely together on our 2 poems, so that even like the clothes that he was wearing, the main character was wearing, and his was wearing in mine. And then we added James, which turned out perfect because it was a different style. And what it ends up coming down to in this 3 poems that we put together are him starting, Stephen Dobbins is the poet, starting as a photojournalist looking for reality, kind of in like an objective reality, truth, and not finding it as a photojournalist in a newspaper. And then switching all the way to the other side of subjective truth, which is poetry, where he does find it. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Great, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Ellie, tell us about the Misfits. How did you find this group, and what inspired you to tell their story?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me in the Misfits as part of Indie Fest. Misfits is a short documentary about this all-girls robotics team in San Francisco. And I had just always wanted to do something about women in STEM, but struggled to figure out the best visual way to do that. And I've always been a sucker for competition documentaries. So when I found out about this all-girls robotics team in the area, I went and checked them out, saw them giving a demonstration to a group of young kids. And when I just saw the passion with which they were showing how their robot worked and how they built it and explaining it to these kids, I knew there was a film there. So I got to follow them throughout their entire robotics season at their different competitions. And it was a really fun ride.
Thank you. So I'm always interested in directors' relationships with the talent that they work with. And since we have both fiction and nonfiction films in this program, my question to all of you directors, for the fiction filmmakers, what is your approach to working with your actors and gaining their trust to kind of get the tone that you're after for your piece? And then for the nonfiction filmmakers, what is your approach towards gaining your subjects' trust, and also making sure that that what they're giving you is also fitting with the tone of how you're telling the story that you want to tell? So let's go back to Maverick.
I think there's a famous quote out there that says something like 90% of directing is casting. And so one thing we really emphasized was just having a casting process where we did everything we could to try and cast the right people. So we did have a sort of a rigorous auditioning and casting process. And really beyond that, it was just rehearsing with the actors a lot before we actually shot. And when we shot, allowing room for improvisation for the more comedic elements of the script. So, I mean, in regards to casting for Werner, for example, we had the first thing that we asked, we did an online search. We searched everywhere. And we first had the actors for Werner send in a self-tape of the monologue from Burden of Dreams, which is a documentary about making Fitzcarraldo.
Right.
And after that, then the actor sent in a self-tape from scenes from the film. And then after that, a chemistry test with the actress in the film, China Walker, who I worked with previously on another short film and wanted to work with her. And as far as Klaus, that process was a little different. We wrote a monologue that we wanted the actors to send in a self-tape of. We got some, but while I was doing that, I got an email from this actor named Andrew Perez. And Andrew emails me outright and says, basically, I've reincarnated Klaus Kinski. I put on a one-man show of him. I've worn his clothes. I've studied him for years. And we Skyped because I wanted to make sure, Klaus Kinski wasn't going to come to Texas where we shot the film. And he was super cool and nice, but it was just a rigorous process of casting. And then we had a lot of rehearsals beforehand just to make sure that we got it right. And the actors were all really gracious and talented, and they're all awesome people. So that's really it, I guess.
Right. Have Klaus or Werner, the real versions, have they seen the film, or do you know?
So Klaus I think he's passed away quite a while ago, but
oh,
Werner,
right. I'm sorry. Yes.
And then Werner, I don't know. I don't know. Hopefully
Right.
soon.
Anything's possible with him,
Yeah.
right?
I think he's kind of hard to get a hold of.
Jeremy, tell us a bit about your approach to working with subjects on your film.
Yeah, and I don't know if this film is the greatest example of that, how I usually approach, but I mean, I think in general, it's listening and sincerity. When I was working on a film called The Church Force of Ethiopia, it was a bunch of emails to Dr. Alamayu, and he didn't know who I was, and and he gave me just a short amount of time. But when I arrived and we hung out for half a day, you know, next thing I knew, I was over at his house for dinner and he was giving me more time. So a lot of it is, for me, it's, you know, being sincere and truly listening. And so with the Arc of the Apocalypse, you know, I was only up there for 3 full days, and hadn't met anyone. And my main interviewee, Ken Ham, who founded the whole thing, when I was already there, got a call like 11 o'clock at night from his assistant and said he can't do the interview tomorrow. So I got tossed Bodie Hodge, his son-in-law, and the townspeople that I interviewed, I mean, was literally just driving around and like stopping in at the appliance store. Hey, how's it going? Working on this documentary. And yeah, so my approach was just, you know, being myself, but also, you know, truly there to ask sincere questions. You know, what do you think about this? And, you know, why this, why that? And then as far as like, you know, directing in documentary filmmaking, like I got this idea in my head that I wanted everybody to look up at the sky, sort of super slow-mo, looking up at the sky, like sort of the coming. And so I would just ask everyone after the short interview, hey, can you step outside? I'm gonna have you look around, look up. And, you know, we're all doc makers. We're very familiar with directing non-actors. So it just takes, I guess it just takes, you know, being personable and having them trust you with their story, their image.
Did you find that they were hesitant at first when you were there, or were they pretty open and wanting to talk about the Arc?
Yeah, there was a lot of hesitancy because it's such a fixture in a very small town. So there's not too much hesitancy to praise the Arc and to say great things about it, but to get people to talk negatively about it or question it or not be okay with it, that was actually nearly impossible, just because people didn't want to have that voice out there living in that small community.
Right. Thank you.
That was difficult.
I can imagine. Sherry, tell us about your approach to directing talent now that we have a dog with us.
This is the lead of our
Yes.
film. And the approach with him was a lot of treats. He's a dachshund, so he'll do anything for food. And my husband would be on either side of the camera if he wanted to run this way, if he wanted to run that way. And it was just like a lot of different takes, tons of takes with this guy. But as far as my human actors, the lead of it's a very small cast. It's really just, let me see, we have Kelly Ray O'Donnell, who's incredible. She is a theater actress, and she's with the Labyrinth Theater Company in New York City. And I've known Kelly for years. I'm also an actor. So I, you know, always wanted to work with Kelly, and we worked together doing some readings. And I love her as an actress. She's so grounded and real, and has excellent timing. And then I just asked friends, you know, I mean, I know so many amazing actors, and I wanted to keep it local. So, you know, that the apartment building that we shot, the very last shot, that's the guy who plays her ex-fiance. He lives in that apartment building. I'm like, let's just keep it super, super simple. And the other, you know, people that we asked that had some lines in the opening when she finds the dog, I just ran up to them in Tompkins Square Park and was like, hey, you want to be on camera? Sign this. So it was really kind of rogue in that respect. yeah, but otherwise it was, I have a relationship with Kelly already. We're really good friends. And I know how she works because I've worked with her as an actor before. So working with her as a director was so easy. And when you're working with an animal, it's like you just have to respond to whatever the animal's doing. And just my job was just to make sure that the camera was on them, And
Isn't there that old Hollywood saying that working with kids and animals are the most difficult?
yeah, never work with kids and animals,
Right.
right? Yeah. Well, the animal's mine, so I was like, how bad could it be? There was only one time he didn't do what I wanted him to do because he was just really tired and I wanted him to play and he just wouldn't do it. So we just had to cut around it,
Right. I'm sure he understands.
He has no ego. He's really amazing.
All right. So Terrence and Jen, tell us your approach to working with the talent in the film.
Yeah, so Michael May, Sheridan Fox, and Janine Gaskin, I've worked with over the years since I've been in Cleveland for the past 18 years at Caramel House, the historical Caramel House. And I continue, I'm no longer there anymore, so I continue to work with them. Michael May, of course, is, I worked with him. We've known each other since the beginning when I got here from New York. And he worked with me in outreach programs, and I directed him in a lot of August Wilson plays. And he was we call him the Ving Rhames of actors in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm very collaborative with actors, and I'm very out of the box, standard conventional works, and also out of the box experimental works. This piece here, even though considered using slides, pictures of slides, was very experimental for me because it wasn't a standard narrator. We actually had the actor to narrate the deceased life, the character of playing the character of David Gregory. So when Jennifer mentioned earlier about how long it took, because there's no moving pictures, it's still shots. So I just couldn't have Michael to just do a straight, flat narration. He had to add more emotions to the pictures. And there were times when Jennifer would listen to the narration, which I consider monologue and not narration for Michael. She was started getting it and started sending me more photos. I said, Michael, she just sent me a picture of, the one that got me was a picture of Emmett Till's mother falling to the floor. Mm-hmm. And I remember doing a standard narration, he was very on a different tone. I said, this particular line, by the time it gets to that image, Michael, you need to emote a little bit more. You need to take the emotion a little higher. So we sent him the footage so he can look at it. And this is during the pandemic, by the way, we shot this. So we were basically communicating through cell phone, texts, and the audio and narration we were sending to the actors, and articles, certain articles on David Gregory, so they can get the feel of what the character was about. So I'm very collaborative. And that was the key of making sure that Michael May, he had about 2 different versions. So we had to see which one that worked. But I'm very collaborative with everything I work with. But it was really very specific, and to get it right. And I know there are times, Jen, because like she said, it was her first time. And I mean, La Jetée, it was only one movement. She said, Terrence, there's only one movement in this 20 or so minute short film, La Jetée. Right. And knowing this film here is only 8 minutes, 46 seconds, I said, can you at least give me 2 movements? At least 2. And she was able to put that in, of course, the smoke at the very beginning. And when David Gregory comes to life and says, I can breathe. But I get actors who know I worked with in conventional works and unconventional works, and they're willing to go down into the foxhole with me if something goes wrong.
Thank you. Yeah.
It was really interesting because Terrence is directing while I'm taking the still photos. And it was like this very symbiotic thing where like he's directing through my camera and even though there's still images, there was acting going on, which I know
Yes.
nothing about acting, but it was just very emotional. And I hope that the still images captured that emotion. But I've never, yeah, it was definitely a collaboration.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The power of the voice over the stills is, you know, it's really, really something. Let's go on to Birth of a Poet. Zach, tell us a little bit about the approach to working with the actors on the project.
Yeah. So to begin, I was really fortunate to work with Logan Marshall Green and Chloe Sevigny, but because they were big actors, I didn't actually get to work with them before we were on set. So I met them about 5 minutes before we started shooting the
Wow.
first poem. And one of the things I did, knowing that I wasn't going to have time with them, because it was a period piece, I went and I looked for two things, something that I could give to each of them when I met them that would pertain to their character, that they could put in their pocket to kind of ground them in the period, but also form that connection between me and them. So as a journalist, I got Logan Marshall Green an old Mont Blanc pen that I went down into like Wall Street. They have a store down there that sells them. And for Chloe, I got a vintage makeup case. And so I wanted to give them something that right away we would have a connection. Even with that, the first poem we shot was a complete disaster, which didn't make it into the movie. And at the end of the first day, we were going to go back the second day to shoot the second poem. And I heard Chloe reading the dialogue and kind of mocking it. And I thought, oh, wow, this is not not good. And I kind of talked to her and she was like, yeah, I don't know how we're going to make this interesting or make this woman interesting. And I was just like, went home that night and was up late and just thinking like, oh my God, what am I going to do for tomorrow? And just thinking like, what a bitch she was. And about 2 a.m, I worked through it enough and I kind of realized maybe she's right. And so I got out my computer and I started rewriting. And then when I showed up the next day, I went into their trailer with them. And the second day we only had a half day to shoot. And I went into the trailer and I sat down with them and I said, we're going to sit and we're going to rewrite this together until we're all happy with it. And of course the producers were like going crazy. Like, you've been in the trailer for 2 hours. What are you doing? But we sat together and we rewrote it, all three of us. And we finally got it to where everybody was happy, you know, with the scene. And then Logan looked at me and he said, I can give you half of those lines without any dialogue. And I said, great. And we went and we shot it like that. And that for me, I learned a lot from both of them. But one of the great things I learned from Logan in that moment was sometimes in a script, you need the dialogue on the page to help people tell the story. But when you're working with the actors, you have the visual. And so oftentimes you can subtract dialogue and they can just give it to you in the emotions and the body language, you know, in a castaway look. That worked really beautifully. And at the end of that second scene, the second day, everybody was happy with it.
That's a great story about stripping things down. Ellie, tell us about how you approached the subjects in your film and gained their trust and what it was like working with them once you had the cameras rolling.
Yeah. So I made The Misfits actually as my thesis film in my MFA program. And it was my thesis film. So the first year of the program, we actually were making one film every quarter. So it was a really different pace going into the second year where suddenly I was afforded much more time. I got to make one film over the course of the whole year. And so I really wanted to take advantage of that time to get to know my subjects more in comparison to the first year where it was such a rushed schedule. And so I actually got to know the Misfits over the summer and made a point to really just want to spend time with them, have my camera around them so they could get used to being filmed as subjects, and then got to film with them for their off-season competitions and get into the hang of that with them. So by the time it was really production time, I think everyone was really comfortable with it, and I'd developed really strong relationships with them by that time. And that was really important to me. And I ended up feeling like a part of their team by the end of it, which I'm really grateful to them for opening up and trusting me like that. But being a part of the Misfits team means also being a part of their families. And that was important to me. Working with young people is earning the trust of not only them, but their families. And I was really grateful that everyone was so open and really welcomed me onto the team. So I'm a forever fan of the girls, and I want to create my own robotics team now because of them.
And has the film been helping to get out the organization, so people can know about it more?
Yeah, I hope so. Their team is growing every year, and it also, I hope, just encourages people from different cities. It's a big competition that happens every year. It's called First Robotics Competition. So I'm hoping it gets people interested in STEM, and young girls especially.
Right. Thank you. So I'd also like to ask everybody, I guess Zach kind of hit on this on the last question, but I'm curious if there was a moment for everybody in their project that that they felt this is when the film is really clicking for me, whether it was shooting or in post, at some point where you just thought, wow, the idea that I had in my head, what I really wanted to achieve, it's working now. If you could share maybe what that moment was and why it happened. So let's start with Maverick.
I mean, almost every day I wondered if it was a big disaster and I shouldn't have done it. But there are a few moments where I think during production, I think natural things happen through like improvisation or the performances that gave me a lot of hope and, oh, this could be really fun or good or compelling or whatever to people. So I guess it was every other day would be having moments of hope and then having moments of doubt, as I'm sure a lot of people in this call can relate to. But really it was just kind of seeing the actors do their thing. And I guess that's really what gave it the life that it has. And then another thing, I guess, was in editing. When you edit a film, I feel like you realize that it's become something that it might not have started out being when you were writing it. And I think when you discover that, when you realize that, when you accept that, the film kind of becomes what it is. And, originally I kind of imagined it as this sort of Twin Peaks inspired, sort of dry, sort of quirky film. And then it gradually became more of, I would say, a farce. And so when I accepted that, I think that's when the film became what it was. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always some kind of moment, I think, for most filmmakers, or sometimes maybe multiple moments. But how about for you, Jeremy?
Let's see here. I think that moment came, I filmed it right before Christmas, didn't look at the footage until early January. And then just to get a sense of it, I edited a little like assembly rough cut in like 4 hours of just this thing. And when I put that together and I kind of knew like, oh, I want the bow tie pastor guy to start this thing off. And I put this thing together and I looked at it and I was like, this is amazing. This is great. This is exactly what I want it to be. The irony is that when I then parked it because we decided it wasn't a good fit for Emergence Magazine, when I came back to it in August, this was like one of the hardest films ever for me to edit. Because like that initial thing, it like showed promise, like, ooh, this is going to be good. But like, what is it? And I had too many layers and too many things I wanted to say or explore. And to get it to its current form was so hard. It was like, it was just this like jigsaw puzzle. And fortunately, I sent it to the New York Times op docs. They were interested. And so then I worked with 2 supervising editors, and we kind of puzzled it out on phone calls and conversations. And then, finally got it to this point of, I guess, purity in that it didn't try to deal with too many ideas or things and just kind of let it be what it is. And I kind of, just without saying anything and without inserting too many wild juxtapositions, got to create a little tension and you know, ability for the viewer to hopefully pick up on some of the subtle nuances in there. So anyway, I had the moment, and it was a false moment.
And how about for you, Sherry? What was, did you have a moment like that? And if so, what was it?
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm a first-time filmmaker, so it's the whole thing. You know, I've spent so much time on sets my whole life, you know, as an actor, and then I started writing a bunch of years ago. So I was, you know, actor, writer, hyphenate. And then I was like, well, why don't I just try directing too? It's something I'm really interested in. So I wanted to surround myself with like a really supportive group of people, which, you know, I did with my friends and my husband. So just like collaborating in that way. The first time we all showed up to the first exterior shot in Tompkins Square Park, like Maverick, I almost lost my mind because we hadn't scouted it at 7 a.m. We scouted it at 9 a.m. Big difference between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. in New York City in Tompkins Square Park, especially during a pandemic. It felt like the early 90s again. You know, lots of, unfortunately, like a ton of homeless, lots of, you know, garbage. I'm 5 feet tall. Like the garbage came up to my shoulder. I was like, what the hell are we gonna? So I was like, I was like, this is a bad idea. I shouldn't have done this. And then, you know, we waited a little bit and the people came and cleaned it up. So then, so that first shot that we took, I was like, okay, I can do this. This can happen. This can look like the way I want it to look. So I guess that moment, and when we started editing, when we put the music in, that's really what kind of did it for me. I really wanted to, I feel like the music really helped tell the story and, you know, moved it in the rhythm that I wanted it to move in.
Okay, thank you. For the resurrection of the last black man, what was there a moment that really felt like the project was clicking for you?
Yes, it was actually.
Sorry,
me,
go ahead.
For me, yes, it was. I would say it was, for me, it was right before we started. I'll say a day or two before we started shooting. I had been doing a lot of research on David Gregory. And I remember one article that mentioned that they dragged him to his mother. And his mother said, "You done right, white folks." Then I look back on May 25th when George Floyd was calling for his mother. And I said, oh my goodness, there's something missing here. And originally we were set to have Michael May just to play the adult David Gregory, you know, narrating and meeting his mother at the very end. I said, we need an age of innocence in this piece. And I decided to bring a younger David Gregory into the part. And of course, when we did that, Jen was constantly editing and in between the slides of historical images, we're seeing the younger David Gregory come reaching out to his mother. And I said, oh yes, this is feeling good here. But I must say, let me say there's a tie. There's also Mahalia Jackson's music, The Upper Room, that we play the last half of the film.
But originally, I wanted Minnie Riperton.
Yeah, well, yes, we had Minnie Riperton. I sent her Minnie Riperton, who I love dearly. I sent that to her to listen to. I said, oh, Welcome to My Garden by Minnie Riperton. Let's listen to that. She said, I love it, I love it, I love it. And I said, I don't know. I would say a day or two. I said, I don't know. And then I said, Mahalia, the upper room, because they're all dressed in white. You know, the upper room, you know what that means. We see David Gregory meeting his mother. And I sent it to her. She said, I don't know, Terrence. I'm still stuck with, Come to My Garden with Minnie Riperton. I said, what we can do is I'm gonna send you the recording again, listen to it, and match it up along with the film. Turn off Minnie Riperton, turn it down, and play Mahalia. And she called me back and she almost did a hallelujah.
But guess what? There's a version of it that I have with Minnie Riperton still.
Yes, we do have that version too. That version is in the file.
Secret version. But I hate to say it, but you were correct, Mahalia.
Yes, but that's what got me there.
Thank you. Zach, you kind of touched on this with your anecdote with Chloe. Was there another moment that you had kind of an epiphany as well?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like that, like going into their trailer and just working with them and making sure we were all on the same page and we were all happy with the story and the characters was what created that moment that came later. And that moment later for me was it wasn't in the script and it wasn't in the direction. And that's usually where those surprises come for me, where I'm like, oh wow, we've set this up and now it's working. And it came when Logan had his character had turned and kind of knocked her down on the kitchen floor, and she'd hit her head on the table, and she was telling him to just get out. And we kind of understand that this could be the end of the relationship. And he steps over her. We see him take the keys, and then we just hear him leave, and we hear the door shut. And she's so tough and so strong throughout the entire scene. And once that door closes shut and he's gone, she just collapses and starts sobbing. And that moment for me was like we got it. Like that was the character. Even though we hadn't worked it all the way out to there, we had set it up for her to be able to then, finish it. And that's for me when I was like, okay, we got something special.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ellie, what was the moment for you on your film?
Yeah. Well, with making the Misfits, I knew it would be fun just to capture their competition season, but I did want there to be some kind of resonance and meaning beyond the film and beyond that one moment in time in their season, and more of like the impact that these girls have by just being women in STEM. And so the bookends of the film, there's a scene where the girls, the high school girls on the team, are mentoring a first grade class of girls in a STEM class. And that day of shooting was so much fun because first graders are just a hoot. They're so hilarious and fun. But watching the Misfits interacting with them and seeing these little first graders look up to these high school girls on the robotics team was just like an amazing moment of, this is why I wanted to make the film. I'm hoping that it was kind of a meta moment for me of like, these little girls are looking up to the Misfits, and I'm hoping that anyone who's watching the film is going to look up to these first graders and be inspired and want to get involved. So yeah, that was a really special day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's a great story. So that's unfortunately all the time we have. I wanted to thank everybody again so much for being here with us. But more importantly than that, thank you all for creating the art that you make and for putting it out in the world, getting your voices out there. And I encourage everybody at home who's watched these films to tell friends and family about them. Look up these filmmakers that you're seeing right now, see their other works and what else they've done. And please watch more shorts in the festival. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure listening. Yes.